Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for this final J-term session. My name is Ellie DeWitt, class of 2019, and I'm a member of the Bold Council. I'm also a fifth-year PhD candidate in education policy at the University of Pennsylvania. The Bold Council, who is kind of co-hosting the J-term, represents all graduates of the last 10 years and works to enhance the connection between young alumni and the college. And we're very excited to be co-hosting the J-term with the Office of Alumni Relations. So now we're going to get started with our panel, and I'm going to ask Kailey and then Andrea to introduce themselves and give a little bit of background on what they got their graduate degrees in.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you. My name's Kailey. I'm from the class of 2021. I got my master's in design management and communications from Georgetown University, and that falls under their School of Continuing Studies, and I graduated with my master's in May of 2023.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrea Zaleski, and I graduated in the class of 2015 from Gettysburg. I was a double major in political science and public policy. And this past May, I just finished my master's in public administration, my MPA through the University of Pennsylvania, like Ellie, and it was with the Fels Institute of Government. And I did my program in an executive format while I was working full-time.
Thank you both for that. So we're going to start with, we have a bunch of categories of questions, so we'll ask a few from each, and then at the end we'll save time for certain Q&A. But if there's anything in particular that you all want the panelists to talk about, or the particular programs that you're interested in, you could put those in the chat, and we can use those to help guide the discussion. So the first kind of thing that we're going to talk about is how you choose to attend graduate school. So Kailey and Andrea, why did you choose to go to graduate school, and what factors were important to you when you were thinking about the type of degree you wanted, as also the school and type of program that you chose?
Sure. So I majored at Gettysburg. I majored in studio art, and I felt that that was like a pretty broad major. And I knew I wanted to pursue graphic design, but I didn't want to actually major in graphic design because I didn't want to be so like straightforward in whatever I was pursuing. And as far as when I was looking for institutions, I definitely wanted a reputable institution. Like Gettysburg, I wanted something similar. And ideally, I wanted a remote schedule because I knew I wanted to work full time. And I also just was looking for an institution that provided a lot of course variation. I didn't want somewhere that was focused on that core curriculum and only had a few like gen eds that you could choose from. I really wanted a variety of things to choose from.
Kind of similar to Kailey, I knew I wanted to go to graduate school after my bachelor's degree. I really thought I was going to go to law school, and I thought I would work for a few years and then like get my application together for law school. But I started working in college admissions at Gettysburg, and I actually really fell in love with the work I was doing, and really decided I didn't want to apply to law school. It didn't sound of interest to me. So I sort of was looking for more professional opportunities before I really committed to like what I wanted to do for my graduate degree. And so after working at Gettysburg, I got a job at the University of Pennsylvania in their undergraduate admissions office. And after kind of being an admissions officer for a couple of years, was sussing out different opportunities at Penn, working at a higher ed institution that has a graduate school comes with a lot of great benefits in terms of like tuition reimbursement, or it's sort of like part of a perk of being an employee at a higher ed institution. And so I knew I would have some funding to be able to do a program at Penn if I was accepted. And I was weighing different options, and having been a political science major, it was something that I was always drawn to. And I really believe in public institutions. And so I decided to pursue my master's in public administration because it was different than kind of working in higher ed every day. And it allowed me to be in a cohort of people coming from all different kinds of job areas. We had lawyers, we had folks that worked in City Hall, people that work in nonprofit organizations and fundraising, and just really different career areas. And I was excited to have that sort of be my network of folks that I would get to know through my program, and also get to do work that was different than my day job. And kind of like Kailey, I chose a program that had sort of a remote component. So my program was both virtual, like weekly, and then I had a one weekend a month, like in-person kind of intensive program, which I was supported by my boss in attending, which was great. And it was flexible because I was still working full-time, but also able to manage a full-time master's program.
Great. Thank you both for sharing those. So what do you think was your biggest challenge in applying to your graduate program? And what do you think was the most important factor that kind of allowed you to get into your program?
The most challenging part about my program was that it has design management in its title and communications, and my degree was in studio art, and studio art is painting, drawing, pottery. So there's no graphic design. So it was kind of challenging in that sense, but I took it upon myself to pursue like independent studies and a bunch of internships. And from those, it's not a bad thing, but with the creative industry, you have to kind of go an extra step and be able to build your own portfolio. And that usually requires building a whole website. So that's a part of the application that's just a lot more time that you have to allocate than just simply filling out an application. And then another thing that helped me with getting into my program was that when I was pursuing these independent studies and these internships, I used those people for my letters of recommendation because they were in this creative industry already. And I think that really helped speak to not only their expertise and they were recommending me, but it also just showed a supportive community and that they did truly believe in me. So I would say that was probably the most challenging part.
I think one of the things that I found challenging about applying to my program, and I will say that programs at Penn because that's where my tuition money could go towards. But doing the application, you had to write an essay again. So I felt like a lot of the students that I work with of like, oh, I'm going back through the college application process. And I had to sort of put on that academic writing hat again. But my program in the application asked for sort of like real work experiences that had, whether you had made a decision about a program and like what impact had that had, or sort of really having to articulate like the reason why you wanted to do this program. And I was thankful that I had taken the time. I took like, holy, I think it was like 7 years between graduating and sort of like when I started my graduate program and applying. So I felt like I really knew like I was ready to do this. I knew why I wanted to do it. I knew what I wanted to get out of the program. And that did make writing those essays a little bit easier, but I still had to sit there and be like, oh, it's like writing my Common App essay all over again. And I had to get a letter of recommendation, and I did reach back out to Professor Bruce Larson, who was my advisor during my time at Gettysburg, and I encourage folks to stay in contact with those folks that were important to you academically, because if you decide to go to graduate school, you'll likely need some letters of recommendation. And while I didn't feel like my current employer was maybe the best person to represent me for this program, Professor Larson was more than happy to write my letter of rec, and it was nice to reconnect and be able to sort of share that knowledge with him. So.
Thanks. So the next set of questions are about funding and financial support, which may be kind of different for you both since you worked full time, but if you maybe have any kind of anecdotes of people that you know who had other experiences, feel free to kind of talk about those too. So how have you managed financially as a graduate student, and other opportunities for funding, scholarships, or assistantships kind of within your program, or maybe other programs that were at your institution?
Yeah, so I was remote. My program was fully remote, and I like literally never stepped foot on Georgetown's campus until I was walking across the stage at my graduation. So I did feel a little bit disconnected from like all of the resources, not that they weren't online and I couldn't have accessed them, but I kind of already knew going into grad school I was going to pay my own way. So I took out your typical federal loans. I was looking on their website. They did offer scholarships, but they were very far and few. I don't really have any experience with anybody else going to grad school that I can talk to like for them about this. But yeah, there's definitely opportunities for scholarship, and having it be a fully remote program did help with cost because I didn't have to pay for room and board. I didn't have to pay for a meal plan, and I didn't have to move to Washington, D.C. to attend class. So that was really helpful that it was remote.
I was fortunate to have support from my institution, and I do highly recommend, like, there are some employers that will reimburse for grad schools or certain kinds of programs that like might help you in your career. So always like check your resources around you. You never know what's going to be available. And two, also the kind of program you're looking at. Like the Fels Institute offers a lot of scholarships for folks that maybe have had prior military service or have done public service. So things like AmeriCorps, Teach for America, or other like nonprofit work would qualify you to apply for some of their institutional funding. And so definitely take advantage of that. Budgeting is key. I think no matter what kind of, whether you're a full-time student, whether you're part-time, you might be part-time with an assistantship. I didn't have an assistantship, but my former roommate post Gettysburg, Shruti Nayak, who's a class of 2013 grad, she went to Michigan for a master's in higher ed, and I was living with her when she was doing all of her interviews for grad school, and part of that application process was applying for internships that or assistantships that would basically cover like at least half of the cost of her program, so that she was like working, getting experience in the field she would be going into, and also was like contributing towards the cost of her master's program. So weighing out those different opportunities, seeing what makes the most sense for you. I was thankful that I could keep working full time while doing this part-time program, but some folks love to dive straight in. And so, I mean, Ellie, maybe I'll turn the table to you a little bit since you're also a graduate student and can maybe share your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, the PhD is a little bit different from master's in terms of the funding structure, and it does look different depending on your institution and what your degree is in. So I would encourage folks, if you're interested in doing the PhD, to do a lot of research online at the institution about what their funding packages look like. Sometimes your advisor is responsible for paying for your stipend, so they get a big grant and that pays for your research time. Other places, and Penn is an example of this, at least the Graduate School of Education is, where we're funded from the institution. And so everybody gets funded the same amount of time for the same number of years, and it's not tied to a specific project or a specific advisor, which I think personally felt like a kind of safer bet because the money was secured. You knew you had it for a certain period of time, and you had that flexibility if maybe you wanted to change advisors. If it wasn't a good fit, you weren't worried about them for your income. Oftentimes, programs will also cover your tuition and health insurance, which is also a really great benefit. But it varies drastically by institution and whether you're getting paid for teaching or research. So often after you apply, if you get accepted, you get a bunch of forms explaining what your stipend is and what the benefits are. And I would encourage folks to ask a lot of questions at that phase, talk to current students, kind of see what they think the stipend is like for that specific geographic location. I remember one institution that I had gotten into, they were going to give me like $7,000 to live for a year. And that didn't seem realistic in that particular location. So to me, that was an automatic no to that program because the financial support was something that I paid a lot of attention to in my kind of PhD search. And so I would not be afraid to ask those like hard questions about support because the institutions get a lot out of you as a PhD student. And so you just want to make sure that you feel like you can kind of financially support yourself through the stipend that they give you. Okay, so the next set of questions are about kind of life in graduate school. So I'm curious for you both, kind of what was the biggest challenge in your first year, and also kind of what was the most rewarding part of your graduate experience?
Yeah, so I decided to go to graduate school like immediately after I graduated from Gettysburg in 2021. And I feel like 2021 was just a mess because of COVID. And once you graduate, not many people talk about the fact how your life kind of gets almost turned upside down. For me, like my friends live all across the world now. I haven't seen them in 2 years. So going through that transformational period of graduating, just being a recent graduate, but then also I was entering the workforce for the first time, and now I'm working 9 to 5 every single day of the week. That was a whole adjustment. And having to deal with like PTO, like what is that, you know? But then also at nighttime, I had to come home and do my grad school assignments. So it definitely took a little bit of transitioning and time to get used to that schedule of working during the day and having that motivation to come home at night to work on my assignments. And I, like a true Gettysburgian, was on the accelerated path of my master's program. So I maxed out my schedule every semester. So fall and spring, I had 4 courses. And then even summer, I had courses because I wanted to graduate early the quickest I could. What was the follow-up question that you said?
What was the most rewarding part of your
The
program?
most rewarding part was that I got to graduate early. You know, I'm the only one of my friends that has a master's degree, and I think that really established me in the professional world. After I was at my first job and got that kind of my foot in the door, I was able to move, and now I work at Gettysburg College doing their social media, and I feel like I don't want to say it definitely just like established me more as a professional being able to have my degree at 23.
I think the hardest part about transitioning back into academics and having classes and having homework was probably the homework and like working all day and then being like, okay, I'm gonna sit on Zoom for this hour and I'm gonna learn these things, but I also then will have to spend the rest of the week like going through assignments while I'm also trying to feed myself because I don't have a personal servo and I have to do laundry and all of those regular kind of life things on top of school. And I did really miss just being at Gettysburg and being like, oh, I only have to think about doing homework. And yes, I have to take care of the laundry, but otherwise everything else is taken care of. And so kind of creating that balance and setting those boundaries and sort of knowing for yourself, like what time will I need to work on this? Some semesters I was usually doing 2 classes a semester, so kind of the fall, the spring, and the summer. And some classes were much harder than others, and so is that finding that balance where I was like, okay, I know I have these assignments coming up for these big projects, and I'm still going to need to do them, but I also have to live the rest of my life, and I still want to see my friends. But I also need to make time for homework. And I think what was really helpful in getting through all of that was having a good support system around me. I'm thankful that a lot of my friends do have their kind of next degree, whether they did go to law school or they also have a master's or they have kind of a terminal degree in their field. And so they understood while they maybe had already done their graduate programs, they were like, I remember what it was like being in grad school and how hard it was. So they understood when I said like, oh, I can't go do this weekend, or I'm going to have to miss watching that game with you or whatever because I have to do my homework. And having folks around you that were cheering you on, but also understanding of what you had going on in your life made it a lot better. I was worried, not that I wouldn't make friends, but having that sort of cohort or really collegial experience in grad school, because I was like, well, we're all working. It's not like we're going to the student union or going to clubs or going to events all the time, because a lot of us most of the people in the program were at least 5 years out of college. Some of us had kids and like full lives that had already existed, and this was the next chapter. And so I was wondering, like, when I make those connections that I so cherished about my Gettysburg experience. And I will say that having a cohort, having a group of people that were also like working full time and doing this and had chosen to do that actually made for such a great collegial experience that I walked away with like really good friendships and connections, not only like professionally, but really like people that I know, I'll be like, oh yes, like my friend from grad school. And that was like a really fulfilling thing. So I was a little unsure if that was going to occur, and it did. So highly recommend like going in with an open mind to this experience, and also knowing there will be times where it's really challenging and also times where maybe it feels a little bit easier. But knowing kind of why you're doing it kept me grounded throughout the whole thing.
I think as a full-time student, it's like a little bit different because for me, like school is my job. So I've tried to treat it as such. And I think like Andrea was saying, creating those like boundaries are really important. And so I have tried to treat my program like a 9 to 5 job as much as I can. Like I go to my office, I work there all the day, and then I like come home and try to turn off my brain from school stuff. And I found that that has been really helpful to me. Another thing kind of like socially with like making friends like in your program, but also like outside of your program. Like I have friends who aren't in grad school. And so they can't always relate to those things. And like Andrea was saying, like you have to kind of like miss out on some stuff, which is very different from undergrad when everybody is like going through the same thing and kind of understands that experience. But then kind of having the cohort, I think, is also really important. Like, I don't think I would have survived my program without these like 4 women who are also, we all joined together, we all study different things, but we've kind of been along this journey together. And I think, having them and finding like your people in grad school is much different than in undergrad, but I think it's like equally, if not more important, to like build that community and those relationships in grad school. If you could give your kind of pre-grad school self a piece of advice, what would you tell them?
I would tell them definitely don't rush into it. I think I would have enjoyed maybe a gap year between graduating from Gettysburg and then going to Georgetown. I was hesitant because I've heard people say that if you stop school, you're not going to want to go back, but then some people do want to go back, and I just didn't want to risk it. So I just went for it. But I also think I wouldn't have rushed my program as fast as I did. As I mentioned earlier, I was on the accelerated track, so I had a maxed out schedule. And I think I would have liked to take maybe 2 courses a semester so I could actually put 110% effort into all of my schoolwork. Because I'm not going to lie, did I miss a few readings every week? Maybe. It happens. But yeah, probably just don't rush.
I think I probably would have told myself, there were times that I like cried over my program, and I was like, it's okay. Like this is hard. There was a lot going on. You were like a full adult with full responsibilities, and it's not going to be like it was in undergrad, and like to accept that there were going to be some challenges. And I don't regret anything that I did, like the classes I chose or getting to like take some classes. The class that made me cry was a class that required me to learn R, and just, seeing something spit red text back at you is never going to make you feel good. So I was like, why did I do this? But I wanted the challenge, and I wanted a new skill set. That's like really something I wanted to get out of my grad school experience, was just different skills that I didn't get to do in my job every day, or things I wasn't going to develop naturally in my job, but that I wanted to be able to have in my back pocket. And I think being open to those new experiences and like reminding myself of that at the beginning of the program probably would have been my best bet to feel good at the end.
Those are both really good pieces of advice. So our last kind of bucket of questions are about balancing work and life, which you touched on a little bit. but how did you manage the balance between like your academic responsibilities, your personal life, and for both of you, like your full-time jobs? And are there, support services or resources that are there to help graduate students kind of navigate any sort of personal or academic challenges they face?
Yeah, so I kind of it took a minute, but I got into the schedule of I would go to my job 9 to 5, and then on the evenings, Monday through Thursday, I would come home and work on my schoolwork for like an hour or two. Fridays and Saturdays were always left free, so I could have that time to like just relax and decompress a little bit. And then Sundays were obviously full grind days because assignments were due on Sundays at 11:59, like they always are. And then as far as support services, I would say I'm a pretty independent person, so that's not something I really looked into. But if I had a question or anything, the professors would always be one email away. I'm assuming Georgetown offers support services. I can definitely look into it and let everyone know, or it's probably just a simple Google away. But yeah, that's probably how I manage my time and all of that.
Yeah, kind of similarly, it was a lot of like still using a planner, still like blocking out like when I had schoolwork, when I had things at home that I needed to do. Because there were also like social events I like wasn't willing to miss for grad school, like people's weddings or other celebrations. And so just knowing how to kind of budget my time that way. Something that I really wanted out of my program was to be able to kind of tie in some pieces of my work into projects that I was doing with my program. And some of my colleagues did that more intentionally than I did, I think, because I was trying to sort of learn something new and not just do college admissions all day long. I chose projects that were a little more outside of my day-to-day work. But some of my colleagues like structured their capstones around like big projects that they were doing for their job that they could also align with their schoolwork. And I thought that was like a really great way to be able to leverage kind of both of those spaces. Because I feel that grad school is like a professional development thing. If you're working, like I wasn't afraid to do work at like school at work if I needed to, because I was like, I have time, I have space. It will make me feel better if I do that. And it's helping me become a better, person with skills that hopefully my employer will be like think is valuable. So while I didn't do all of my schoolwork during my job, I did bring a little bit of both in. And I think as an adult, okay to do that. Penn was really cool because at Penn, it is stressed that all of the kind of support services are open to all of the students on campus. So places like the Writing Center or academic services like advisors, whether it's within your program or kind of more large like academic advisors, were available to graduate students as well. So there were lots of resources on campus to utilize. Career services especially was not just located in the program. Like we had our own kind of career advisor within our Fels program, but you also have access to like the entire institution's career services. So that I think is an important thing to consider when you're considering like different kinds of grad schools and thinking about like at the end of it, like what are you hoping to get out? Is it an alumni network? Is it those job opportunities? Are you going to pivot and you want to make sure there's like connections that can help you land in that new space? And noting like what resources are available to you at the institution. I utilized some of them, like the Learning Resource Center had a great calendar for like the entire academic year, so you could like plan out when your assignments were due or big projects, and just to be able to see it all in one place was really helpful, especially as I was working on my like capstone, because it's sort of like not necessarily like doing a thesis, but it's a very involved project that you're also trying to do at the same time as you're working, and just being able to have other people help you plan that was really huge. So definitely look for those pieces of support, whether that's for the career aspect of it, the academic aspect, the social aspect. There's a very big, and maybe Ellie, you're more familiar with this, but there is like a large like graduate student association, like kind of like student council and those kinds of things for grad students at Penn. And that will vary like depending on the kind of program you're doing, or if you're looking for that, like know that you can look for those things at different institutions.
Yeah, I can add on a little bit to what Andrea was saying. I know at Penn, there are resources that are open to all students, but there also are graduate student specific resources. So there's a graduate student center, which is just like a dedicated building space where you can reserve rooms. They have like free coffee and like events for grad students, which is nice. Like, you know, once a month they have like free food. So those are always like quite popular. But there's also a graduate student like government, and they host a lot of events that are specifically for graduate students. And that is really nice, like at an institution as big as Penn, to feel like there are events and opportunities and support just for graduate students. But then there also are like the general career services and like the Learning Resource Center and the libraries and all those types of things that you get as an undergrad are also available to you as a grad student. And I feel like I've learned to like take advantage of like Penn's resources while I'm here, like even like going to the library and like checking out books for fun, like take advantage of those like kind of institutional resources while you have them. And there's a lot that, you know, being a student can offer you. And so trying to look for those things and taking advantage of those things when you see them, I think is important. So that's kind of all of the questions that we have. If anybody here has a question, feel free to unmute yourself or drop it in the chat. We'd be happy to kind of answer any other questions that you all have. Okay, so the question is, I think we all can answer this one. Did you know that you wanted to do a master's or PhD for grad school, or did you consider both? And how did you choose? So I guess I can go first. I'm muted. So I knew that I wanted to do research as kind of my career path. I really fell in love with doing research, working in the psychology department at Gettysburg. So some of the programs I applied to were just PhD. Some of them are like master's and PhD, so you can get like a master's along the way. And if you decide that it's not a good fit for you, you can like leave with just the master's, or you can continue on to get the PhD. I mean, the PhD is like a big commitment. It's, you know, 4 to 6 years, depending on what your kind of path is. And I think if you really want to do research and want to be kind of a leader in whatever your like field is, and that I think is kind of the way to go. That's kind of just my insight on that.
I can go next. I was only considering kind of master's programs. I think considering law school, that would have been, I guess, the JD, and then you could go on to get more after that. But for me, myself, I knew that sort of the master's level and maybe more of an applied master's, so to speak, was sort of the route that I wanted to go in my next step in education. So I didn't consider any PhD programs, although I have many friends that are like, you should do your educational doctorate. And I'm like, I just don't have enough thought yet to contribute to the body of work. So I've not closed the door completely, but I'm like really satisfied with the spot that I'm in with my education right now.
Yeah, I only wanted to get my master's. I think I don't want to say it's rare in the creative industry for someone to go for a doctorate, but I have seen like Carnegie Mellon was on my list of schools and they have a doctorate of design. And it's all just like building blocks. Like you start with your 2-year master's program. And then if you want to extend a year or two, you can get that doctorate. So it's just a building block. I don't think Georgetown offers a doctorate of design, but I know that there are programs out there. So for me, it was always master's, and that was it.
I also know that there are places where you could go and like you could start the master's, then you could like apply to the PhD kind of while you're there. Or I know a lot of people who have gotten their master's in one place, and then while they're there, they decide that they want to get a PhD. And they apply kind of either they apply somewhere else. So I think that there's like a lot of options, and there is a lot to consider. I also remember when I was applying, you could like, if you applied for the PhD, you also could say, yes, consider me for the master's. So you kind of got like a twofer in that application process. Okay, so the next question is, were there a lot of job opportunities or research opportunities through your department while a graduate student? I can say for the ed school at Penn, there are a lot of like graduate assistantships that students get that helps kind of support themselves financially. Some people work like in the admissions office or like places like that, or different offices around campus. I know for research opportunities, there are some of them are paid, some of them are unpaid. I think it depends on like the faculty specific kind of grant money or the department's budget, but I think faculty from the research side always want to push out more research. And so often just like asking around, I think is a good start to get those opportunities.
Yeah, I will say, so I like currently work in the undergraduate admissions office at Penn, and we employ 4 graduate assistants from the Graduate School of Education. So they are far and wide, and we have a really large campus, so they are everywhere. So there's definitely like GA type positions. I will also say I felt that my program wanted to make sure that folks had really practical like experiences to put on their resumes as part of the program. And so I felt that research was built into our coursework, and kind of the culminating capstone project for some folks like really was like a research kind of experience. And of course the faculty were also like happy to take on folks that were pursuing additional work. So I think if that's something you're looking for, it's definitely something you can ask about, and you should be able to get a good sense of like what will be available at your institution. I'll also say that doing a program full-time with other people that are also working gives you like a built-in job exchange board constantly. So our group me was just people posting job opportunities all of the time, and some people like switched jobs during the program based on like new things they had learned or got jobs kind of afterwards just because of being in the program. And I think that is like, that was a really cool asset that even though I wasn't necessarily looking for a new position, just getting to see folks that were able to capitalize on that like was a pretty neat experience, and knowing that like I could access that when I needed was great.
So my program was fully remote. I know I've mentioned that a few times, and it's basically designed for people that are working full time, but then also it's for people that are all over the world. So we're not physically all together. So kind of having those like job opportunities and research opportunities through Georgetown, I don't really think was too common. I'm not saying that they didn't exist, but they were more project based, where a professor could have been like, hey, this alumni's business is looking for a graphic designer to design X, Y, and Z. Would any of you guys be interested? That was more so what we were dealt. But our capstone project, we had to actually go out and find a business and do a whole project and actually kind of like freelance for the business. I don't want to say it's similar to an internship, but we definitely did have that more in the real world experience through our capstone projects. But yes, we were all fully remote and all over the world. So research opportunities and job opportunities, they were there, but it wasn't like a core of the program.
If any of the, folks attending feel comfortable, like we'd be curious to like know if you've started your application process, and kind of if you're thinking of a particular program and kind of where you are in that, where you're thinking of going, and kind of any advice or help we could give you kind of where you are, we'd be happy to do that.
I guess I'm actually I've already applied, and I'm in my graduate program for at University of Maryland starting this fall. I mean starting the spring, sorry, not fall. I was originally for the fall and deferred for the spring, but I'm also kind of in between job opportunities right now as well, and was interested in maybe what they would have at like my program, or potentially at the college for me to look into as well for like employment as well. Because yeah, I took sort of the gap year someone was talking about earlier for that they wish they took, and then decided to kind of go back to graduate school. And It was nice, but it's weird going from kind of the working world to back to graduate school as well. So I'm kind of like in that stage right now and wasn't sure what to do work-wise at this point as well, but was looking for something through my department, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Can we ask Kevin what kind of program you're doing? Because congrats, that's awesome that you're headed that way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm in the Geospatial Information Sciences program at University of Maryland, which is also it's hybrid technically, but I'm enrolled remote. So I'll be also kind of doing the remote graduate school thing like you did, Kailey. And I think it's sort of like they have it scheduled at night, which is nice for I think like every class starts at 5:30, so you can kind of balance like work during the day with it. So I sort of was debating whether I wanted to look at like a company to sort of work through, or if I wanted to maybe find like part-time work through the department or something like that.
I will say one of the benefits about having grad school that's fully remote and what benefited me is at nighttime I was going and doing all my schoolwork and learning all of these things, and then I could implement them the next day at my professional career. And I think that just provides that value and unique experience. Like literally you're learning something and implementing it the very next day. You don't get to do that very often. Usually you have to like finish your career, your graduate school, and then go into the career. So I think that experience is something so cool, and you look like an expert and you're surprising your boss with something new every day, like employee of the month.
Yeah, no, that sounds great.
I think too, depending on like how far away from campus you might be, or like utilizing the student employment opportunities on like Maryland's a big place, so they'll probably have some things that even might be remote that like graduate students would be able to work on if you're looking for something, if it's not through just your department, but really through the whole institution. That might be another route just to consider, because we see that all the time in my office at Penn. Is like people are working all across campus or doing all different kinds of things that maybe aren't directly related to their program, but are through the institution and are helping with their cost of going to college or to your graduate program. So
Are there any other questions or any kind of like advice or kind of anything that you want to hear from us? We have another 15 minutes, but we can end early if there are no other questions, but we're here and we're happy to answer anything. All right, well, hearing kind of no kind of questions or nothing in the chat. Thank you all so much for coming, and we hope this was helpful to you in your graduate school experience. A lot of kind of Gettysburg folks do go on to graduate school, and I think any of us are willing to offer advice or answer any questions that you may have. So thank you so much for coming, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their evening.